Welcome to the Propreneur Podcast, where we help practice owners become better entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Dino Watt. And welcome once again, everybody, to the Propreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Dino Watt, and I'm super excited to have you here today because, number one, I've been wanting to speak with Jill Allen for the last couple of months. She's somebody I've known for a few years now, seeing the amazing things she's been able to talk about at events and all the established amazing projects she's been working on with her company, Jill Allen and Associates. But before we do, I want to make sure that we say a big thank you to all of you for listening to this show and sharing it with your friends and colleagues. It's because of you that we are really creeping up on our 100th episode. We have some really awesome things in store for you, and you are the reason why I do this every single week. So thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to subscribe and also to share it with your friends and colleagues. That being said, everyone, let's welcome my friend, the amazing Jill Allen, to the show. Jill, welcome.
Hello. Hi, Dino. Thanks so much for having me. I mean, what an absolute honor it is to be a part of this show. So
well, here's
thank you.
The secret that's really funny. Thank you for saying that. But what's the secret really funny is this is really just going to be a Dino and Jill conversation and everybody gets to listen in on it because there's often times where I'm interviewing people that I've just met. I met like 15 minutes or 10 minutes before the show. But I've got to, we've been able to hang with each other in different locations and be able to see what each other does. And there's just really a good synergy around what you're doing especially with the startup world, which I think is amazing because, man, if you can lay a foundation for people and do it right, dang, like the sky's the limit. So congratulations to you on all your success and what you're doing.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Yeah, I bet. It sounds like having fun. Well, before we get into all of that and you let us know about what really Jill Allen Associates does and the whole, catalog of services that you can provide, let's talk about you. I always say on this show that stories are what connect all of us. We should all be talking about our story more often. So tell us your story. How did you get into this world of orthodontics and then doing what you're doing now?
Sure. So I have been in the world of orthodontics a little over 28 years now, which is really hard to believe when I
think about because you're 30, which is really weird.
Right.
That's odd.
Exactly. Just creeping up on it. And I got into it. I was a brand new mama. I actually been married 30 years now, and was kind of just finding something to do after I'd had my first child. And my mom actually had been in the orthodontic industry. And so it just kind of was a perfect fit. I actually started off as a sterilization assistant, if you can believe that, way back when. When I started in our industry, we were still bending straight wires and, tap welding bands. So it's been a long time since I've been in the field. And, I started in that sterilization realm and just thought, oh, I just love this. I love this industry. Moved my way up. I worked for a very progressive orthodontist when I first got started. And he just really believed in training people up if they wanted to learn. And I was all about that. So jumped into the clinical side of it. Learned anything and everything that I could learn on the clinical side, and became a trainer, and then, kind of moved from there and just thought, gosh, I love this and I just got to know more. And so from there, made my way through an office over the years in different practices. And I've always been very, very lucky to have worked for very progressive orthodontists who really believed in training, who really believed in getting their teams out there. And I'll say in front of the sages of our industry when they were at the prime of their industry, of their consulting. So just, and I would look up to them and just go, I want to be just like her.
Oh, nice.
I want to be just like him. And so, that really propelled me as I was moving along. And, about almost 15 years ago now, I finally made the decision to become a consultant. And, I was at a point, we had babies young in life. And I told my husband, I said, what's the worst that's going to happen? I can fail. But, really, what's the worst? I can go back and work in an office. And so I was able to, start my business and got some really good clients under my belt that were able to, wanted to take a chance on me. And kind of how I got into the startup realm was I had worked with a few doctors who were in that startup phase. And I just thought, gosh, there's so much that they don't know. They're great clinicians, but they just don't know how to run an office. And I'd been doing this, for lots and lots of years. And so that's, I really looked at that and said, I think that's where I want to be when I become a consultant. That's where I want to live. I like being kind of down in the trenches, figuring out things. And I was one of those gals that took, I had notebooks after notebooks. I could go all the way back and, be like, here's the best way to describe an arch wire, or here's the this, or here's the best way to get a patient to say yes to treatment. And so that kind of was my catalyst for, jumping off and then getting into the startup realm. And I absolutely love it. It's so fulfilling to me to be able to help doctors, see their dream, bring their dream to fruition, and then let them see success and know that, I was able to help them get those fundamental pieces in place so that they can take off and live their dream. So
that's amazing. That's a great story, and so much to unpack in there that I want to talk about, because there are people that, as I mentioned before, I always try to put myself in the driver's seat of a doctor listening to the show on the way or to work, and what would they ask? What would they think? And sometimes what I don't want is listeners to think, oh, okay, well, I'm not a startup. This doesn't apply to me. You know what? I believe a startup is when you're ready to start anew, and maybe you've been doing things the same way for the past 10 years. And now you're like, you know what? I need to throw out the old established way that I have been doing it because it's not working for me. I'm going insane, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And that's a new startup. But before we get to that, I love the word, you used it twice, progressive orthodontist. Talk about the difference that you've seen between the progressive orthodontist and what that is in your mind and everyone else. Like, what else is out there?
I think when I look at that, and what I saw was this doctor that was able to look beyond themselves and say, it's beyond me. I need help. I need somebody else to convey a message to myself and my team in a way that maybe I can't do it. And, and I looked at that, when I was with these, what I consider very progressive orthodontists, that they were willing to spend the money to get their whole team to go as a group to, to a conference. They were willing to step outside of, just let's have a meeting every other month and kind of redo the same thing over and over again. And so I just, at the time, that was very progressive because, I felt like, they were taking a chance on getting new views. And I think nowadays, when we look at progressive doctors, it's those doctors that are willing to be part of the study groups and willing to, take their teams to the conferences and willing to dive deep, into, different programs, and just willing to say it's bigger than me. It's bigger than me and what I know. And I'll take any help I can get to make myself and my team better.
Well, I think that's great because there's an old coach that I had years and years ago, probably a good 15 years ago, who would talk about this idea of stepping over the dollars to get to the dimes. And what it sounds like you're talking about, what I take away from that is just being willing to invest in yourself. Yes, even when you don't think you have the funds or the money to do it. Like, you find the ways to invest in yourself and your team so you can get an ROI. Like, so many people are like, they'll pay whatever it is, $30,000 for an iTero scanner, but they won't invest, $30,000 in a consultant or any type of education that's going to help them get to the next level of business. The iTero scanner is only as good as the person using it.
Correct. Yeah.
And your business is only as good as the person who's leading it. And so you better be working on that sucker. So
that's exactly right.
That's so important. You talked about the challenges with having a startup phase, right? One of the things that I've found sometimes is you have people who don't know what their dream is, don't know what the ideal business for themselves is. So how much of your conversations are around that, like establishing what they want as opposed to a really successful business?
Right. And that is such a great question. And I think there's a different answer for everybody out
Mm.
there. And that is something, I do a lot of accountability calls with my doctors every month. So it's not just business coaching, but there's that personal accountability, and what are we doing there? And, that is something we talk a lot about. And I really try and encourage my doctors that I'm working with that your dream doesn't have to be somebody else's dream, or somebody else's dream doesn't have to be your dream. So
Love it.
just because somebody wants, 5 businesses and wants to own all the monopoly pieces doesn't mean that your dream to work 4 days a week and have time with family and your kids is somehow less of a dream or not going to be as fulfilling as that person's. And so, it really is trying to dial it in for each of us, for each doctor out there, and really trying to pull out what it was. And I think especially I see this a lot when I work with a lot of doctors who've done acquisitions. So it
Mm.
isn't just startups, it's, maybe they purchased somebody else's practice, and that other person's dream may be all over that practice, the way
Yes.
the hours they work, the team members they hired, the this, the that, the marketing plan. And now they have to come in and go, does this really align with what I was
Right.
looking for? And how do I change the direction of this ship? Because this was somebody else's dream, but what am I going to do with it now?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, it's very true, right? It's like they walk in those different offices that they're going to acquire, and how do they get the team to jump on board, right? It's interesting
yes,
because when you have companies, I use a lot of references to companies like Disney and Apple and stuff. Disney establishes their own brand. They don't go in and acquire something else and try to make it their own. There's a totally different mindset when it comes to that, and a totally different work ethic that has to happen, because you've got to help, for lack of a better word, assimilate those people into your
yes.
vision. And what I've seen is, if they don't have that established, if they don't have a good dream or vision, it becomes chaos.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And, you really have one pulling against the other. And it's just very hard for practices to move in any direction. You just kind of get stuck,
Right.
right? And it's not fulfilling for anybody. So, I think circling back to finding that dream, and then being able to, dial it in and move forward. I think for a lot of us, we have to do the work, the hard work to
Yeah.
identify what that is, to then be able to deliver that to our team. And sometimes you can do that on your own. Sometimes you need help like yourself,
Yeah.
somebody to come in and help with that. So,
Yeah.
but we
Absolutely.
have to do the work. We have to do the work.
How do you like when people come to you, whether they're coming to you? I'm assuming the majority of the clients of your clients are people who are deciding, okay, I'm going to start my own office. Maybe they've been an associate before. Maybe they've been working at a corporation, whatever. Maybe they're just right out of school. How do you start the work with them? Because it is so overwhelming. Like, there's a
Sure.
lot to be done.
Yep. Well, I do kind of work in 3 different areas. I do a lot on that startup phase. I do
Mhm.
a lot in that 8 years and younger, air parentheses, which is just 8 years into your own practice,
Got it.
or I do a lot with 8 years to retirement too.
Oh, nice.
So, depending upon, where a doctor is coming and what they're looking for is really where we start and dive in. If it truly is a startup, that's about a 6-month process before we've even got doors open. So
Yeah.
we are working on determining, not just where are you going to practice, but why are you going to practice there? Because
Wow. Smart.
that's important. You can, choose a location because, well, the demographics are great and I just got to go there. But, how fulfilled are you going to be in 5 years when your family is all the way across the country, and now you're ready to have a family? And you know what I mean? Like, this is, we're playing that long game, right? We're playing,
Yep.
doing the big haul here. And so there's just so many factors that go into that startup, if we were talking about that realm,
Right.
and kind of what we're going to do within those months to getting your doors open.
Is that easier than dealing with someone who's trying to maybe reestablish themselves or reinvent themselves, and that after the 8 years type thing? Like, which one's easier? I don't know if it's easier or not, if that's the right question, but yeah, what's easier? Because I would think that people with a
I
mindset sometimes
honestly,
sounds great, but it's not.
Yeah, honestly, I think that the challenge is it's, sometimes they say it's just what's your stress tolerance, right?
Mm,
There's different stresses that come along with it. When you do a startup, if you're truly doing a brand new startup, the stress level is I'm starting with zero. I've got zero money, zero patience, and I got to grow this dream. I got to bring this to fruition. I think sometimes when you're looking at somebody who's done an acquisition, or maybe somebody who has been practicing for a while and they've had a whole team turnaround and they feel like they're a brand new startup again. Now it's, okay, I've got to figure out all of these, like with an acquisition, I got to take all of these systems that aren't mine, turn them around and get this, get me going in another direction. And so, it's just, I think they're just different in what you're going through. I honestly think a lot of times my existing practices struggle a little bit more than my startups do, believe it or not.
and is that because the team's also established and they like don't want to turn that boat and they're
Yeah,
happy with where they are,
yeah,
they're in that comfort zone?
yeah, absolutely. And I think it can be very difficult, especially if we're a younger doctor coming into an established practice.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times we got to remember that the senior doc who may have been leaving may have had his or her dream team, but they were
Yeah.
his or her dream team.
Yes. That's right.
And now this dream team is not your dream team.
Yep.
And they may have been wonderful for the doc, and they may have been loyal to for as long as the day is long, right? But with you as the new doctor, new vision, pushing for new things, new technology, change, which is always a pinch point anyways for a lot of offices, that dream team doesn't feel so dreamy anymore a lot of times. And it can just be a really difficult, there can be a lot of tension that goes
Yeah,
on with
so
that.
let's go down that route because I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about. If, to people who are listening that maybe are about to or just have acquired another office, what are some of the things that you would tell them if you were advising them? Like if there's the top three things to look out for, to be aware of, what are those things that you would have them really look for and do?
Sure. So I think number one, and this is going to sound really harsh, is rehire everybody on a 90-day probationary period.
I
And
love it.
I know it can sound like a pinch point, but again, they may not be your dream team. And
It's so
you, as
nice.
a new doctor going into a practice, you have to make sure that these new team members are going to be on board with your vision, your values, your directives going forward. And as hard as it is to let somebody go, it's better to let them go in love and be done in 90 days than to hold on to them for years and years and just always have tension in an office. So that would be my first thing, is rehire everybody on a
Love it.
90-day probationary period. That's also a good time to reset, how much you're paying people. But the first thing is just, number one, rehire them on a 90-day probationary period. The second is, I really think it's important to, if you are doing an acquisition, in those 90 days, before you make any big changes, just get in there and watch what's going on.
Mm.
See the systems that are in place. And, I usually tell my clients, if you are going to bring a consultant in to help you, do it after 90 days. Do it after you've had some time to, get a lay of the land. Because you may come in thinking, this, and this, and we need to do this, and this, but 90 days gives you a good foundation for
Sure.
knowing what direction you need to go. So that would be, number two. And then, number three, I would just say, take the time to do the work to know what direction you want to move the practice.
Mm.
What do you want to do that's maybe different than the previous doctor? How are you going to build your brand? Because there is a point that you've got to move out of the umbrella of the previous doctor's brand, and you've got to move into your own brand. And what is your messaging? What are you trying to get out there to the patients existing, but the new ones coming on? And so there's a lot of work that goes into that. And then my last thing, and I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but
No, this is great. I love it.
my last thing would be, and this is people have heard me say this, but I think this is a little bit of a pinch sometimes. Really make sure, if you're going to keep a senior doc in with you, really make sure that they're helping you, not hurting you. And what I mean by that is your team will never see you as the leader, the owner, the director of the business, as long as their previous leader, owner, director was there. And if you're going to hold on to them for a year, it's going to be really difficult for you to move your practice anywhere within that first year. So I say rip the Band-Aid off. 90 days is kind of my window for almost everything. And
good window.
Jump off the deep end and just go for it. Start swimming.
Wow. that is some gold right there, because I mean, look, as somebody, and you've seen this, I think so many of us consultants and coaches out there see this, that there are so many times where I run into somebody, I'm like, why is that person still here? Like, no wonder they're not listening to you. No wonder they're going to them for help or for their concerns. No wonder you feel like you are not the leader. No wonder you're stressed, because you have, it's like, it's a really probably bad analogy, but it's kind of like getting a divorce and then marrying someone, but still having your ex-spouse in the house too.
Yes. Yes.
Like, how well is that going to go? Of course, your kids are going to pit you up against them. Of course, your kids are going to go to what they know. And by the way, I don't blame them for doing that, because that's what they know. That's what they've had for 20, 30 years.
Yes.
And I love this. I mean, to go through these 4 areas, man, if you're listening to this, any of you listening to this right now and are even thinking about this, I love that you start off with saying, hey, this might pinch a little bit. But the very first thing of saying, I'm going to rehire everybody. First of all, great way to establish that you want them to work for you, but you also want to make sure you're all the right fit. I was recently on a call with someone who is going through this exact same problem, purchased an office, and talk about the rebellion against this person. And yet they also want to come in not looking like they're the tyrant, they want to be the good guy or good girl and not go and fire everybody or not feel like they're bad. And what would the community think, because this person's so popular in the community, like the person that's working for them. There's all these excuses that come up, but I love this idea of, hey, 90 days, you're on probation. Like, it's okay. I want you to win. I don't want to rehire. And of course, well, let me ask you this then. Obviously, with where we are in the country right now, where we have been for the past couple of years, hiring the right people, period, let alone the right people, is challenging.
Yes.
So when that doctor comes in, he's like, oh yeah, what am I going to do? I just bought a building. I spent X amount of dollars on this, and now I'm going to let people go if they're not the right fit. So I got to find new people. What do you do in that situation?
It's hard. It's hard to be a business owner. It's hard to make the hard decisions. But this is where maybe I don't, I have empathy, but this is your business, and we got to do the hard things sometimes. And if it's important to you to have the right team, and if you've got the wrong person on your team, it is only going to drag you down. No matter, you just can't put lipstick on a pig and make a pig look better. Like we just have, sometimes we got to do the hard things. And I promise you, it's harder to take a year and be miserable than to take 3 months and run short-staffed and take the time to find the right person.
100%. And there's a reason why I just love what you do, and that we're kindred spirits on that way, because it is almost baffling to me that people were willing to take the pain and suffering over a little bit of frustration, a little bit of inconvenience for a while. I get it. And like you said, it is hard. It is challenging. I'm not saying it's not. And, it's anything in life. If you want the results, you got to do the hard things. There's a great mentor I had years ago who used to say, if you want your life to be hard, do the things that are easy. If you want your life to be easy, do the things that are hard. And that is one of the areas where I find so interesting, and I get it. Like you said, you have empathy. I get it. It's hard. It's challenging. You don't want to look like a jerk. You have all those reasons in your head, but when it comes down to it, your job and your loyalty is to making sure the business runs so you can serve more people. Your loyalty is not to any one individual.
Yep. And you know, I mean, in all of our practices, it's ultimately about this wonderful experience for our patients, right?
Mhm.
And you know, I promise you, patients are intuitive. They can see, you know, it's like
Yes,
walking
totally.
into the, you know, the family gathering at Thanksgiving, and if, you know, Aunt Sue and Uncle Bill aren't getting along, everybody knows it. Well, it's the same thing. Your patients are going to see it too. And, you know, you have to, you know, if your ultimate goal is a great patient experience, if your ultimate goal is to have, you know, your patients feel like it's a family when they come into your office, you know, not that families don't fight here and there, but
You
you got to
grow
have
that
the right,
business though.
got to have
Yeah.
the right people.
Yeah, your ultimate goal, growing that business, and you can't grow the
Yes.
business with a bunch of staph infections running around and
Yeah.
all challenges happening. It's so
Yep.
true. All right,
Yep.
so there's somebody who acquired somebody. Let's talk about somebody who is thinking about starting their own business, thinking about
Sure.
going out on their own, and they're not acquiring anything, they're starting from scratch. That's a whole nother animal. So
Yes, it is.
so what are some of the things that you would say, hey, before before you pull the trigger, here's some pre-advice, pre-pulling the trigger advice from Jill Allen
Yes.
in before you move forward? What would some of those things be?
If I were to give you like my top three, my number one would be, don't make a decision on going into an area just because your gut says, I think this looks like a good area to start an orthodontic practice. You know, I really believe you have to do your research. Every single doctor that I work with, when we're doing a startup, we pull demographic reports, we dig in, we do our homework, we look at the data, we determine if where we are going to do a startup is going to be successful or not, because it's hard enough on its own to do a startup.
Yeah.
But let's don't stack the deck against us. And if you happen to be one of those docs that are like, I don't care what the data says, I'm doing it anyways, then let's go in eyes wide open and know what you're going to do to make yourself successful, because the data is stacked against you. So number one,
before you go to the second one, is there better data than other data, right? Because like you said, I'm sure many guys go in there and be like, well, it's got a population of X and there's only 2 orthodontists in the whole city, right? That to them is a demographic. What's one demographic or data better than the other?
Well, I don't think that there's one better than another, but I think there is a combination of data that has to come together. And the secondary piece is, you have to know as an orthodontist, what do you want to deliver when you are opening your practice? Because, you know, you may be an orthodontist that says, I really want to treat my primary practice, I want to be aligners and adults. Well, that's a completely different demographic than a doc who says, you know what, Jill, if I could never have an adult walk through my doors, I'd be happy as a clam. Well,
Right.
we're looking at 2 different demographics, you know, and we're looking at, you know, so there are, I mean, I could get into all of the details of a demographic report, but I think that it's determining what kind of practice you want, and then determining what factors do we need that are going to support the type of practice that you think you want.
So really it's a matter of saying, like, it makes sense too, is what do I want, which is the number one question I believe everybody should ask themselves, right? What do I want? What would make me happy? What's the thing that I know I can deliver the best value to the people? And then find this space, the place, the city, the town that will help you achieve that, as opposed to what I think a lot of people do is they try to do it backwards, right? They see the
Yes.
demographics, like you said, the doctor is like, well, I don't care about that data, I'm going to do this anyway. It's like, okay, great.
Yes.
I love you, like uphill battle, but
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that that's exactly it. And there are just so many layers when we dive into demographics. There are so many layers that we have
that's
to dive
awesome.
into, just to get the data to feel good about saying, okay, well, I think we found an area. Then my secondary, which kind of leads right into it, is I 100% believe every doctor should have a broker involved, and a commercial broker. When we are looking at doing a startup, in most cases, we're going to be doing a lease. Some doctors are fortunate enough to be able to purchase a building and then do a build out, you know, inside of that. but I'm going to say 90% of my docs, 90%
Sure.
of doctors out there are leasing. We need a commercial broker that understands negotiating leases. And, I do a lot of advising on that. I've done it for years and years now, but we have to know what we're getting into. We have to understand how much tenant improvement allowance we're getting. We have to understand how many months of free rent we're getting. We have to understand, what is the additional costs that are going to come along besides just the rent, that everyone wants to stick on. And then they don't realize that there's, a triple net or, all these other things that go onto it. So you have to understand what you're getting into for the long haul. I've had so many docs that have signed leases because somebody wasn't representing them right. And, you would assume an HVAC system comes with this space. It was never in the lease. So guess who's paying for an HVAC system that wasn't part of your budget? So you have to have, I really believe in a commercial broker that's going to represent you well. And I want anybody who's listening, if you're looking at this, you should never be paying your commercial broker. They get paid out of the deal. So if you've got somebody that's trying to tell you that they're going to charge you to run your deal, you need to find somebody else. So that's my second piece there.
Interesting on the broker deal stuff. When you think about weird stuff, like you said, the HVAC thing, that's crazy. You would think, like, who wouldn't think that would be a part of it?
Right.
I had a doc once who had the idea and thought that the parking lot that was next to him was a part of the deal because it was next to him and there was nothing else around, and it wasn't. And so he had to lease now the parking lot after that. It's like, it's shocking. So yeah.
Or I've had docs that, have got parking spaces right in front of their door and aren't even theirs.
Right.
Can't even be used for their space. Yeah. So
I always say, whether it be or accounting or whatever, like, get a professional to do a professional job. You are great at the thing you do, but you're not an IT expert. You're not a contract negotiation expert. No matter how smart you are, just let the professional do the professional job. Just like I don't want kids, closing the gap in the front of their teeth by using rubber bands and glue like they're seeing on TikTok. I don't want you negotiating a contract.
Right. Exactly. And a real estate, a residential real estate agent cannot do what you need them to do. So your
sister-in-law,
no matter how good she is,
right.
she's not the one who can do the deal for you. And, I could go through all of them, but I think the last thing I would just say is where I find a lot of my doctors really get into problems. And again, this may be a pinch to any of my, anybody who's listening that sells equipment, is I highly, highly, highly recommend that you use an architect to design your space and do not use an equipment specialist. And to any of my equipment specialists out there that are listening, I love you, but docs, equipment specialists are there to sell you equipment. And we have a very small budget. We have every, 500, 600,000 sounds like a lot, but every penny, I promise you, will be used and accounted for. And we do not have just all this extra money to go crazy with equipment. And we are designing an office that's going to be functional for the next 20 years.
Yes.
And so we want somebody who can think about real good design of an office and, flow, and you don't want to be turning a corner and hitting your hip in a cabinet, in a countertop because it was designed wrong, because it fit well, with somebody that isn't what their profession is. So that would be my other take home message. It's worth to pay a little bit more to have an architect design your space, and use your equipment specialists for what they're good at. They are great for delivering great equipment for you. But that would be kind of one of my last pieces.
That's a really smart way to think about it though, Jill, because it's nothing against the equipment specialists. They're doing their job. That's awesome. And your architect is looking at it from a holistic point of view and doesn't have a dog in the pony in the fight, right? A pony in the, pony in the race, a dog in the fight. They're there. They are there to help make sure that it makes sense. It flows. It's so funny you say this because we are in the middle of building a house right now, and we had an architect obviously do our blueprints, and he's this gentleman who's like 75 years old. He still does everything by hand. And we had our neighbors who said, oh, go, this is the guy we use. It was like $30,000 for the plans to draw them up and stuff. And this gentleman, what was so awesome about him is not only was he less expensive, but he took so much time to figure out what we truly wanted.
Yes.
And what we wanted, as you said, for the next 10, 20 years, if this is our forever home, what would you want? And then the fascinating things that he was able to come up with that we would never have thought about on how to design it correctly, how to make the flow right. That's what an architect's there to do. That again, going back to professionals doing a professional job, let them do that. I think that's golden advice right there.
Yep. And, of course, when I'm working with clients, I'll advise on that, but I'm not doing the drawings. I'm not getting it ready for the MEPs and for, mechanical engineering and plumbing design that also comes in, plus HVAC, plus, there's so many other pieces. But, I think that, having, the right people in place to get you through just, is going to, help you a ton. And I know we're just kind of scratching the surface with startups. I can continue to go down the list here, but those are probably, if you're just getting started, those would be my top 3. And then it kind of goes from there.
Well, I love it. Well, that's an amazing foundation, right? The foundation of these 3 things alone should take you some time to think about, think it through, have a plan, get somebody like Jill in your corner to be able to say, so what do you think about this? And throw those ideas around. I mentioned a moment ago about not having a dog in the fight. I think, yes, of course, you are a consultant. You want to make sure that they get what they want out of their new startup. But one of the most powerful things about having a coach and a consultant is the fact that they are looking at it for your best result. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be there for 20, 30 years. Jill's not going to be there for 20, 30 years.
Right.
Yeah. It's really
interesting. No, I mean, that's exactly it, and I just, I think you've got to be thinking about this long, what it is the future. It isn't just about let's hurry up and get in and design it and get going, because that, that's so, you're not seeing the forest for the trees there. You've got to be looking at, where do I want to go? Where do I want to grow into? How do I want to? And it seems like it's too big of a space right now. But what happens when I get to a point where maybe I do want to see 100 patients a day, or maybe I do want to have multiple consult rooms going, or maybe I do want to have another doctor in the office. So you gotta at least think through that, talk about it, and then have the opportunity to plan for it.
Well, it's interesting, right? We as the doctors, they'll talk to a patient who they want to see their teeth straightened now, right? And what do? You have that conversation of, well, we got to establish a few things. We got to make sure we're doing this right. So it's not just a matter of getting your teeth straight, but having straight teeth the rest of your life. And so it's the same conversation. It's just in a different context.
Yep, absolutely.
Wow, that is awesome. Jill, I have enjoyed this so much that you were able to explain a lot of what you do. We have a lot of the same mindset, which I love. And I hope that everybody listening understands that the whole point is that if you are going to start a new business, or you're going to transition your current business, right? If you've made that decision,
correct.
You know what? I want to retire in 15 years, but I don't want to retire with what we have right now. I know that where we are is not going to get me to that 15-year retirement. If you're ever feeling or thinking, man, am I ever going to being able to retire with what I'm doing right now? Well, Jill's probably the person you need to be talking to about that plan. So I love it. I think it's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that wisdom with us.
Yes, absolutely. And this has been wonderful. I love our Dino and Jill talk. This was great.
Love it. Right? So glad people can listen in.
Yeah, exactly. And,
well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and thank you for what you're doing too. I mean, just, I am a follower of you as well. And, just to see how positive and just all of the wonderful things that you're bringing to our industry too, and our teams and our doctors. I just thank you for what you're doing.
I appreciate that. Well, you're welcome. And I appreciate that. I think it's a lot of fun. I'm training myself, just like I teach my team members to take the compliment and take it in, right? It's hard because we're living in a world where it's like, oh no, it's because of you. Oh no, but I appreciate that. That's very nice. Well, we're at a place in
Absolutely.
our show where we ask our 6 questions to every single person, and it's a rapid
Ooh.
fire just off the top of your head. Are you willing to
Ah,
play?
I'm willing, but I'm not great at trivia. So let's see how I
Trivia.
do.
Don't worry, I won't be bringing out the pop culture stuff. Anything.
Okay, good.
All right, you get to see a lot of doctors and businesses out there. When you look at them, what do you feel like is the most expensive thing that private practice owners are missing in their practice?
All right, this is going to sound a little cliche-ish, but I think it's time and knowledge. Um,
Wow, no, that's
uh,
true.
and and you know what? I feel like we all don't have enough time, and a lot of times, in turn, then we don't get the knowledge because we don't have the time. And and I just feel like that's priceless. And I think it's so, like how do you put a dollar amount on that? So
You can't. You're absolutely right. And it's I know for myself, it's a matter of prioritizing that time and
oh,
well, actually dedicating the time, not even prioritizing,
yes,
because I let a lot of
yes,
things go that I was supposed to prioritize, but dedicating that time. Yeah,
yep, yep.
you're right.
So I
Knowledge. We're going to talk about a book in a moment, your favorite book. But one of the things that so I have a mentor named Jim Quick. He is a mind, speed reading coach and stuff like that. And he talks about how the power of books is you take somebody who has researched something for a decade and they've done all the studies and everything, and they put it into a book, and you could get their knowledge of that topic, at least a really good knowledge, maybe not all of their knowledge, but a good deep understanding of their knowledge in sitting down and reading a book over a week. You can do what they did in a decade in a week. That's what I love so much about books and what we have there. So you're right, that knowledge
yes,
is precious.
yeah, yep,
Love it. So
and
speaking of
and
books,
yes.
what's a book you think every private practice owner should be reading right now?
Oh, now, okay, this is a hard one for me. Kind of my oldie but a goodie is Traction. I
Oh,
actually
great.
have it right here.
Dino.
This is like a go-to book. I think every practice by Gino Wickman. And if I were speaking to any female docs out there, because can I say two, my favorite book right now that I think every female doctor should read is the Brave Not Perfect book. Um,
Oh,
I love this book. It spoke to me. And I just think from a business owner and as a woman, I love this one. And it's by Reshma Sonji. I don't know if anyone
Resma
can see that.
Sound.
Yep.
Sound.
So I do Audible. I always
Me too.
have my books because I like to highlight in them, but I'm an
Same
Audible.
thing.
Um, I probably have done that like 4 times. I love
Wow.
it. I love it. So I mean, not that men can't pull something out of it, but it really spoke to me as a woman and a business owner. So that would be,
Is it specifically? So I recommend my male doctors to read Girl Wash Your Face and
oh
Girl
yeah,
Excuse Me, right? But
yep,
that's not necessarily. I mean, she is a business owner, but it's not necessarily for business owners, more for like the mom thing. But I just want the doctors, especially the guy doctors, to understand a little bit more about what females are thinking or going
yep,
through. Is
yep.
this written for business owners?
It it is
Okay, good.
in a twist, and I think that men could take a ton away from
That's
this
awesome.
too, and maybe just be able to appreciate what women that there are different things that we go through, and just the title is, men start out, where it's all about being brave, and you can, and with most of the time with women it's about perfection, is
Yeah.
your bow on straight, is your, and so it's kind of flipping that switch and being, you can still be brave and not perfect, and it's
Yes.
okay,
I
and
love
I
it.
think a lot of times men jump into things going, I'm just going to be brave, and it doesn't work out, it's okay. Where
Right.
women, we're so focused on we have to be perfect, and maybe I can be brave, so
I love
I
it.
loved it. I
That's
loved
really
it.
great.
That is a
I
go
grew up
to
in a
for me.
household where it was very much more about the perfection, the look of it than, the bravery. So I'm going to really connect with that. That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. Well, speaking of books and my book, The Practice RX, I talk about how team culture and team performance is the foundation for business growth. What do you see when you're talking to these doctors, whether they're establishing a new business or they're trying to reestablish their business, as the biggest challenge that they are facing when it comes to their teams and their office culture?
I feel like it's undefined core values, which then in turn leads to value-based decision making. And I know I just did a little talk on this, but I feel like if we haven't established those core values, which then in turn that does make our culture, right?
Mhm.
But then people can't make those value-based decisions, so if they don't understand what the values are, or the core values are, they're not going to make decisions that are in a line. And then in turn, I think that totally flips the switch for us, our culture being out of sync.
100%. I could not agree more. I was having a conversation with a client of mine, just reiterating again, I believe every problem in every business can be solved with the right core values if
Mm-hmm.
you have established them right. So I love that you said that. Before we go into the last two questions, the fourth question is, how can people get a hold of you? I'm sure there are people who have lots of questions. I know you also have been giving a great value on Facebook with some of your talks, which has been great. So how can people get a hold of you?
I think the easiest way is just to jump onto my website at www.practiceresults.com. From there, if they want to get a hold of me, they can just, fill out a little questionnaire. It takes you right to my Calendly link, and you're going to have a Zoom call with Jill. So that quick, that easy.
And there's nothing better than a Zoom call with Jill. So there you go.
That's
All
right.
What's the number 5 is, what is the best advice you've ever received in life or in business?
I'm going to go back to this book, and just as a woman, and just for myself, kind of the mantra of being brave and not perfect. Take a risk. It's okay to fail forward, be brave, not perfect. Don't wait to be perfect to do something.
I love it. So true. Perfection is the enemy of progress. I love it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Last question. What is the best resource or tool that you believe every private practice owner should be using to grow their practice?
I don't think that it's one specific thing, but I'm going to say staying plugged in and in front of influencers that align with your business values. Because I think there are a lot of influencers out there. And I think, getting involved in Facebook groups, groups like yours, that align with where you want your business to go, because they could all be going in a little bit different, and you have to choose what's going to work for you, or you're kind of going against the grain. So I say, just staying in front of influencers, staying plugged in, committing to push yourself to do the work, and and move forward, and hopefully the groups that you are staying in alignment with are gonna push you to be better and help you be better doing that.
I love it. I think it's so smart, and it's one of the things that I always find fascinating when people have found either their group or their consultant, where it's like, oh, I got this person, I going to this meeting. It's like, you right behind you, for those of you that are watching on the YouTube, you can see behind me, we have bookshelves of books. I don't have one business book I follow. There's multiple, because you're always going to get new ideas. So I love that. Stay plugged in. It's so important.
Yes. Wow. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much again for your time that you spent with us today. I know that we've established a lot of great information. And for those of you that didn't take notes like I was, you need to go back and listen again, because I was taking notes while she was talking. And so I really appreciate it, Jill. It's always a pleasure.
Yes. Well, thank you, Dino. It has been a pleasure, and it's always great to talk with you. And, just thanks for letting me be a part of this.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Well, everyone, thanks again for listening in to another episode of the Propreneur Podcast. Thank you for sharing this with your friends and your colleagues. And thank you for always giving us such great feedback about these episodes. We are trying to bring you the best practices possible so you can grow yours. And don't forget, we always are here to help you be more proactive, productive, and profitable in all areas of your life and business. We'll see you on the next episode, everyone. Thanks so much again for listening to the Propreneur Podcast. We really appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed already, please make sure you do so. Also, if you feel like you might be a good fit for our podcast as a guest, or know somebody who you think would be, go ahead and email us at dino@dinowatt.com. Again, thanks for support. We'll see you on the next episode.